The gunshot echoed through the underground parking garage like a thunderclap, and Ji-hoon didn't flinch. He stood perfectly still, his Tom Ford suit unmarred by the chaos erupting around him, watching as his second-in-command Min-suk put 2 bullets into the kneecaps of the man who'd thought he could skim money from their operations. The man's screams bounced off concrete walls, a symphony Ji-hoon had heard countless times before. But tonight, on this Valentine's Day that Americans celebrated with flowers and chocolate, Ji-hoon felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not mercy. Nothing at all. "Boss," Min-suk said, holstering his weapon. "What do you want me to do with him?" Ji-hoon checked his Patek Philippe watch. 11:47. "Make him disappear. We have a problem at St. Mary's Hospital. Your daughter's been shot in the crossfire from the Volkov retaliation. She's in emergency surgery now." The color drained from Min-suk's face. The hardened killer who'd just calmly shot a man transformed instantly into a terrified father. "Gina? My Gina. Go," Ji-hoon commanded, his voice softening slightly. "I'll handle this. Your family comes first." They arrived at St. Mary's Hospital 20 minutes later, Min-suk practically running through the emergency room doors while Ji-hoon followed at his measured pace. The hospital was decorated with red hearts and pink streamers, cruel mockery for those who came here with real emergencies. Couples sat together in the waiting room, holding hands, some with minor injuries from Valentine's celebrations gone wrong. Ji-hoon found their happiness obscene. Min-suk disappeared through the surgical wing doors, and Ji-hoon positioned himself near the windows, away from the crowds. He pulled out his phone, already fielding calls from his lieutenants across the city. The Volkov family's attack had been sloppy, desperate, exactly what he'd expected from Dmitry Volkov. The Russians were losing territory, losing money, and now they'd made the mistake of involving children. "Handle the retaliation," Ji-hoon said into his phone, his Korean accent barely noticeable after 15 years in America. "Make it swift. Make it permanent. I want Dmitry to know that children are off limits, and I want him to learn that lesson in blood." He ended the call and stood staring out at the New York City skyline, seeing his reflection in the glass. 38 years old, and he looked like he could be carved from stone. His face revealed nothing, betrayed nothing. It was a face that had ordered deaths, negotiated treaties, built an empire from the ground up after arriving in America with nothing but his mother's blessings and his father's legacy of shame. His second phone rang, the one only 3 people in the world had the number to. His aunt and Seoul. Ji-hoon's stomach twisted before he even answered. "Imo," he said, using the Korean word for aunt. "Ji-hoon, ah." Her voice cracked, and Ji-hoon felt his hand tighten around the phone. "Your Amma, she's gone. Heart attack." It was quick. She didn't suffer. The world tilted. Ji-hoon reached out to steady himself against the window, his palm leaving a mark on the glass. Around him, the hospital continued its normal rhythm. Nurses walked past. A doctor called out orders. Someone laughed at something on their phone. But Ji-hoon stood frozen, trapped in a moment where nothing made sense anymore. When the word came out strangled. 2 hours ago. "We tried to reach you, but I was working." The excuse sounded hollow even to his own ears. He was always working. It had been 6 months since he'd spoken to his mother, 4 months since he'd sent money, 8 months since he'd promised to visit Seoul. The territory war with the Volkovs had consumed everything, and now his mother was gone, and he'd never kept his promise. "The funeral is in 3 days, his aunt continued. "Will you come home?" Ji-hoon looked around the hospital, thought about the war raging in the streets, about Min-suk's daughter fighting for her life in surgery, about the empire that would crumble if he showed weakness now by leaving. I don't know if I can." The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. Finally, his aunt said, "She understood, Ji-hoon. She always understood." But that was the problem, wasn't it? His mother had always understood, always forgiven, always waited, and now she was gone, and he'd never have another chance to be the son she deserved. He ended the call and stood there, his phone slipping from his fingers to clatter on the linoleum floor. The sound seemed impossibly loud. A nurse glanced over, concerned, but Ji-hoon didn't notice. He was seeing his mother's face the last time they'd video called, her asking when he'd come home, him promising soon, always soon, never now. The emotion hit him like a freight train. This man who'd built walls around his heart, who'd learned to feel nothing so he could do everything required of his position, suddenly couldn't breathe. His chest constricted, his vision blurred, and then, to his absolute horror, tears began streaming down his face. Kang Ji-hoon, feared across 3 continents, respected by allies and enemies alike, stood in a New York City hospital on Valentine's Day and wept. He pressed his forehead against the cold window glass, his shoulders shaking, completely unable to control the grief pouring out of him. He'd seen men die. He'd killed men. He'd survived assassination attempts and hostile takeovers and gang wars that left bodies in the streets. But this, losing his mother while trapped in a country thousands of miles away, fighting a war that suddenly seemed meaningless, this broke him completely. "Mister? Why are you crying?" The small voice cut through his grief like a blade. Ji-hoon jerked upright, roughly wiping at his tears, trying to compose himself. He looked down to find a little girl standing beside him, no more than 8 years old, with beautiful dark skin and hair styled in intricate braids decorated with purple beads. She wore light-up sneakers and clutched a worn teddy bear to her chest, looking up at him with eyes full of genuine concern. "I'm fine," Ji-hoon said automatically, his voice rough. He tried to turn away, to hide his tear-stained face, but the girl moved to stay in his line of sight. "You don't look fine," she said matter-of-factly. "My name's Zara. What's yours?" "It's not appropriate for you to talk to strangers," Ji-hoon managed, though even to his own ears, the words lacked any real conviction. "My mommy says that too," Zara agreed cheerfully. "But you're crying, so that makes it different. My daddy used to cry sometimes, before he went to heaven. He was a firefighter, and sometimes the fires made him really sad. But mommy said it was okay to cry, because crying means you got a big heart that feels big feelings." Ji-hoon stared at this child, this small person who spoke about death and grief with such simple wisdom. "Your father, he died?" 2 years ago, Zara said, nodding. She didn't look particularly sad about it anymore, just matter of fact. "A building fell on him while he was saving people. Mommy says he's a hero, and heroes live forever in our hearts." She tapped her chest for emphasis. Something about her earnestness, her complete lack of fear or judgment, made Ji-hoon's carefully constructed walls crumble a little more. I just lost my mother," he heard himself say. Zara's eyes widened with understanding far beyond her years. "Oh, that's really, really sad." She was quiet for a moment, thinking, and then her face brightened with an idea. "I know what will help. You can borrow my mom." Ji-hoon blinked, certain he'd misheard. "I can what?" "Borrow my mom," Zara repeated, as if this were the most logical solution in the world. "She gives the best hugs. Like, the very best. When I'm sad, her hugs make everything better. And since your mom can't hug you anymore because she's in heaven, you can borrow mine. She won't mind. She's really nice." The offer was so innocent, so pure, so completely unexpected that Ji-hoon felt something crack open in his chest. This child, who barely knew him, who had every reason to be wary of strangers, was offering him her most precious treasure. Her mother, her comfort, her love. "That's very kind," Ji-hoon said, his voice breaking. "But I couldn't possibly." "Zara Williams, what did I tell you about talking to strangers?" Ji-hoon looked up to see a woman striding toward them, exhaustion evident in every line of her body, but authority radiating from her posture. She wore scrubs covered with the purple designs of pediatric nursing, her natural hair pulled back in a ponytail, and her dark eyes were fixed on her daughter with a mixture of concern and exasperation. Diana Williams stopped short when she got a good look at Ji-hoon, her protective instincts clearly warring with something else, something softer that crossed her face when she saw his tear-stained cheeks. "Mommy," Zara said brightly, completely oblivious to any tension. "This is my new friend. I don't know his name yet, but his mommy just went to heaven like Daddy did, so I told him he could borrow you for hugs." Diana's expression shifted through several emotions in rapid succession. Suspicion, because a well-dressed man crying in a hospital could mean many things. Recognition, because she'd seen enough grief in her years as an ER nurse to know the real thing when she saw it. And finally, reluctant sympathy, because she remembered those first raw days after Marcus died, when breathing felt like an accomplishment. "Baby, come here," Diana said gently, holding out her hand to Zara. The little girl obediently moved to her mother's side, but kept her eyes on Ji-hoon. Diana's gaze swept over him, taking in the expensive suit, The watch that probably cost more than her yearly salary. The carefully styled hair, now slightly disheveled from his breakdown. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said finally, the words formal but genuine. Ji-hoon straightened, trying to reassemble himself into the man he was supposed to be. He bent slightly in a respectful bow, a gesture that felt natural despite 15 years in America. "Thank you, and please forgive me. Your daughter was only trying to be kind. She has a beautiful heart. She gets it from her father," Diana said, and there was pride in her voice mixed with the perpetual sadness of someone who still mourned. He believed in helping people, even strangers. She paused, studying Ji-hoon more carefully now. "Are you here alone? Do you have family nearby?" The question was loaded with more than surface concern. Ji-hoon recognized it as the kind of question healthcare workers asked when they were trying to assess if someone was in crisis, if they needed intervention, if they were safe. He almost laughed at the irony. Was he safe? He was one of the most dangerous men in New York City. Was he in crisis? Absolutely. "I have associates," Ji-hoon said carefully. "My second-in-command is here. His daughter was injured. She's in surgery now." Diana's professional mask slipped into place. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope she recovers fully." She glanced at Zara, then back at Ji-hoon, clearly torn between maternal protection and human compassion. Finally, she reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out a card. "Look, I don't usually do this, but you seem like you're having a really terrible night. If you need someone to talk to, or if you just need help navigating the hospital system, you can call me. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who understands loss." Ji-hoon took the card, his fingers brushing hers briefly. The card was simple, professional. Diana Williams, RN. A phone number. Nothing more. But the gesture itself was extraordinary. In his world, kindness always came with strings attached, with expectations of reciprocity, with hidden agendas. This woman was offering help because she'd seen another human being in pain. "Thank you," he managed. "That's very generous." "It's just human decency," Diana said, but she smiled slightly, and Ji-hoon thought that maybe she understood how rare that commodity was. She touched Zara's shoulder. "Come on, baby. We need to let this man have some privacy, and you need to get home to bed. It's way past your bedtime." "But what about the hug?" Zara protested. "I promised him he could borrow you for hugs." "Zara, it's okay," Ji-hoon said quickly. He pulled out his own card, the one that listed him as CEO of a legitimate import-export business. Nothing that would raise red flags. "Perhaps another time. But thank you, Zara. Your kindness tonight meant more than you could possibly know." Zara beamed at him, and, before her mother could stop her, rushed forward and hugged Ji-hoon's legs tightly. "Don't be too sad, okay? Your mommy wouldn't want you to be too sad. My daddy always said that people who love us want us to be happy, even after they're gone." Ji-hoon stood frozen, this small child's arms wrapped around him, and felt something inside him shift. He very carefully, very gently, patted her head. "Thank you, Zara. You're very wise." Diana gently extracted her daughter and took the card Ji-hoon offered, her eyes scanning it quickly. If she recognized the company name, which was moderately famous in certain circles, she didn't show it. "Come on, troublemaker. Say goodnight." "Good night." Zara waved enthusiastically as her mother led her away. "I hope you feel better soon." Ji-hoon watched them go, this tired nurse and her precocious daughter, and felt the weight of their kindness settle over him like a blanket. He bent to pick up his phone from where he dropped it, and something else caught his eye. A piece of paper had fallen from Zara's pocket when she'd hugged him. He picked it up and found himself looking at a child's drawing, done in crayon on what looked like the back of a hospital form. 3 stick figures held hands. One tall with black scribbles for hair, one medium-sized, and one small. Above them, in a child's uncertain handwriting, were the words, "You plus mom plus me equals family." A large, lopsided heart enclosed all 3 figures. Ji-hoon stared at the drawing. This small piece of hope offered by a child who didn't know that he was a monster, who didn't care that he'd built his empire on violence and fear, who only saw a sad man who needed comfort. He carefully folded the drawing and placed it in his inner jacket pocket, right over his heart. Min-suk found him an hour later, his face haggard but relieved. "Gina's out of surgery. She'll be okay. The bullet missed everything vital, just shattered her collarbone. She'll need physical therapy, but she'll recover." "Good," Ji-hoon said. "Take the next week off. Be with your family." I'll handle the Volkov situation. Min-suk studied his boss's face, noting the redness around his eyes that Ji-hoon hadn't quite been able to eliminate. Boss, about your mother. I'll attend her funeral via video call, Ji-hoon said flatly. I can't leave New York right now, not with the Volkovs making moves. She would understand. But even as he said it, Ji-hoon knew it was a lie. His mother would have understood, yes, because she always understood, but that didn't make it right. It didn't make him less of a coward for choosing his empire over his final chance to say goodbye properly. 3 days later, Ji-hoon sat alone in his penthouse apartment at 4 in the morning, the time difference putting him at the exact moment of his mother's funeral in Seoul. His aunt held up her phone to show him the casket, the flowers, the mourners who'd gathered to pay respects. His mother had been beloved in her community, the kind woman who'd raised a son alone after her husband's disgrace and death, who'd worked 3 jobs to send that son to university, who'd never complained when that son chose a dark path. The video feed was grainy, the connection poor, but Ji-hoon could see his mother's face in the open casket, peaceful in death. His aunt moved the phone closer, and Ji-hoon found himself reaching out to touch the screen, as if he could somehow reach through technology and distance and say goodbye properly. She knew you loved her, Ji-hoon, his aunt said, her voice thick with tears. She always knew. But knowing and showing were different things, weren't they? Ji-hoon had spent 15 years building his empire, telling himself he was honoring his mother by becoming powerful, by becoming untouchable, by never being poor or helpless again. But in the end, what did any of it matter? She was gone, and he hadn't been there, and all his power couldn't change that simple, terrible fact. After the funeral ended and the call disconnected, Ji-hoon sat in the darkness of his apartment, unable to sleep, unable to work, unable to do anything but feel the crushing weight of his grief and guilt. He thought about Zara's words. People who love us want us to be happy, even after they're gone. Was his mother happy, wherever she was? Was she proud of what he'd become, or disappointed that he'd chosen power over presence, money over time? He pulled out Zara's drawing from where he'd kept it in his jacket pocket for the past 3 days, studying those simple stick figures. You plus mom plus me equals family. Such a simple equation. Such an impossible dream for a man like him. But impossible or not, Ji-hoon found himself reaching for his phone at 6 in the morning, exhausted and empty, and calling the number on Diana Williams's card. It rang 4 times, and he almost hung up, suddenly aware of how inappropriate this was, how desperate it seemed, how unlike him to reach out to anyone, especially a woman he'd met for 5 minutes in a hospital waiting room. Hello. Diana's voice was thick with sleep, confused and slightly alarmed in the way people sound when their phone rings before dawn. I'm sorry, Ji-hoon said immediately. This was inappropriate. I shouldn't have called. Wait. There was rustling, the sound of her sitting up, becoming more alert. Is this the man from the hospital? The one who lost his mother? Yes. Kong Ji-hoon. I apologize for the early hour. I wasn't thinking clearly. It's okay, Diana said, and her voice had softened considerably. I told you to call if you needed to talk. I meant it. Are you okay? Was he okay? Ji-hoon looked around his penthouse, at the expensive furniture and the city lights visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, at the evidence of his success that suddenly felt like a prison. Her funeral was this morning. In Seoul. I watched it on video call. Oh God, Diana breathed. You couldn't be there in person? Business obligations, Ji-hoon said, the excuse tasting like ash in his mouth. I couldn't leave. Diana was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, there was a note of understanding that cut deeper than sympathy. When Marcus died, my husband, I was at work. A double shift at the hospital. I'd promised to trade shifts with someone, and Marcus said it was fine, that he'd take Zara to school and pick her up, that we needed the overtime anyway. The building collapsed at 2 in the afternoon. He was gone before I even knew there was a fire. I spent weeks torturing myself with what-ifs. What if I'd been home? What if I'd said no to the shift? What if I'd made him stay home that day? What did you conclude? Ji-hoon asked, genuinely curious. That guilt is just love with nowhere to go, Diana said quietly. You loved your mother. That love doesn't disappear just because she's gone, so it turns into guilt instead, into all the things you wish you'd done differently. But Mr. Kong, she knew you loved her. I guarantee it. Mothers always know. Ji-hoon felt his throat tighten again. How do you know? You never met her. Because Zara hasn't stopped talking about you for 3 days, Diana said. And he could hear the smile in her voice now. About the sad man at the hospital who needed hugs, who was so polite and kind even when he was crying. My daughter has excellent instincts about people. If she thought you were worth helping, then your mother raised you right. Even if you can't see it through your grief right now. Your daughter gave me a drawing, Ji-hoon said. I've been carrying it with me. It's of 3 stick figures. She labeled it, you plus mom plus me equals family. Diana laughed softly. That sounds like Zara. She's been on a kick lately about how families can be anyone who loves each other. I think it's her way of processing that it's just the 2 of us now. She's decided we can just add people to our family whenever we want. It's a nice philosophy, Ji-hoon said. It's a 8-year-old's philosophy, Diana corrected gently. The world is more complicated than that. Maybe it shouldn't be, Ji-hoon replied, surprising himself. Maybe we make it more complicated than it needs to be. They talked for another hour, about grief and loss, and the strange ways life continued even when it felt like it shouldn't. Diana told him about Marcus, about the good years they'd had, about raising Zara alone and the constant fear that she wasn't enough. Ji-hoon found himself sharing more than he'd intended. Carefully edited versions of his life that removed the violence but kept the loneliness, the pressure, the sense that he'd built something impressive but ultimately hollow. When they finally ended the call, with Diana needing to get Zara ready for school and Ji-hoon needing to pretend to sleep before the day's business began, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, but Ji-hoon felt the tiniest bit less empty than he had before. Over the next week, as Ji-hoon orchestrated his retaliation against the Volkovs with cold efficiency, as he attended meetings and made decisions that affected hundreds of people's lives, he found his thoughts returning again and again to that conversation, to Diana's words about guilt being love with nowhere to go, to Zara's simple equation of family. He looked at the drawing so often that the edges began to wear, the paper softening from repeated handling. Marcus, his driver and bodyguard, noticed. Boss, you've been distracted lately. Is everything okay? Fine, Ji-hoon said automatically, but it wasn't fine, and they both knew it. He was going through the motions of his life, executing his responsibilities with his usual precision, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. The Volkov retaliation had been successful, brutal enough to send a message, but measured enough to avoid all-out war. Dmitri had retreated, licking his wounds, and Ji-hoon's reputation had only grown. But none of it mattered. None of it filled the void his mother had left behind. On a Thursday evening, 10 days after the hospital encounter, Ji-hoon did something completely out of character. He ordered Marcus to drive him to Queens, to the address listed on Diana's nursing license that his people had discreetly obtained. He told himself he was just checking on them, making sure they were safe, that it was a one-time thing. He told himself a lot of lies that night. The building was modest, a 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that had seen better days but was clearly trying to improve. Children played on the sidewalk despite the evening chill, their laughter echoing off brick walls. Ji-hoon sat in his town car for 10 minutes, watching the building, questioning his own sanity. What was he doing here? What could he possibly say? Hi, I'm the sad stranger your daughter befriended. I've been obsessively thinking about your casual kindness for a week and a half. Can I come in? He was about to tell Marcus to drive away when he saw them. Diana and Zara, walking down the sidewalk with grocery bags, Zara skipping beside her mother and chattering animatedly about something. They looked so normal, so beautifully ordinary, and Ji-hoon felt his chest constrict with an emotion he couldn't name. Before he could change his mind, he opened the car door and stepped out. Diana saw him immediately, her steps faltering slightly. Zara's reaction was more enthusiastic. It's you, she shrieked, dropping her mother's hand and running toward him. Mommy, it's the sad man from the hospital. Did you come to get your hug? Ji-hoon found himself kneeling down to Zara's level. This dangerous man who'd killed without hesitation, brought low by an 8-year-old's enthusiasm. Hello, Zara. I hope I'm not intruding. You're never intruding, Zara declared confidently. Right, Mommy. Diana had caught up now, shifting her grocery bags to one hip, her expression caught between surprise and something else, something softer. Mr. Calm, this is unexpected. I know. I apologize for showing up unannounced. Ji-hoon stood, suddenly acutely aware of how out of place he looked in his designer suit in this working-class neighborhood. I wanted to thank you properly for your kindness. Both of you. It meant more than I was able to express at the time. You called me at 6 in the morning, Diana said dryly. I think you expressed it pretty clearly. But she was smiling slightly, and Ji-hoon felt something warm unfurl in his chest. Can he come for dinner? Zara asked, tugging on her mother's sleeve. Please, Mommy. He looks hungry. Zara, you can't just invite people to dinner without asking. I brought food. Ji-hoon interrupted, gesturing to Marcus, who was already retrieving several bags from the trunk. Korean food. I thought perhaps you might enjoy trying it, as a thank you. But if this is inappropriate. It's a little inappropriate, Diana admitted, but she was looking at the bags Marcus was carrying, at the clearly expensive packaging, at her daughter's pleading face. But Zara's right. You do look hungry, and not just for food. Her perception unsettled him. Ji-hoon was used to people seeing what he wanted them to see, the cold businessman, the untouchable boss. But Diana looked at him and saw something else, something more vulnerable, and instead of feeling exposed, he felt seen. I would be honored if you'd allow me to share a meal with you, Ji-hoon said formally. Diana studied him for a long moment. This strange man who'd appeared in her life twice now, bearing grief and expensive food, and something in his eyes that she recognized from her own mirror in those first months after Marcus died. Diana sighed and shifted her grocery bags again. Okay, but fair warning. Our apartment is small, nothing fancy, and Zara's going to talk your ear off about everything from unicorns to black holes. She's in a phase where she's interested in literally everything. I like black holes, Zara announced. Did you know they're so strong that even light can't escape? My teacher says that's why they're black. Because no light gets out. That's very smart, Ji-hoon said, genuinely impressed. He gestured to Marcus. Bring everything up, please. The apartment was indeed small, a two-bedroom with worn but clean furniture and walls covered with Zara's artwork and photos of happier times. Ji-hoon saw Diana's late husband in several frames, a handsome black man with kind eyes and Zara's same bright smile. The apartment smelled like vanilla and something floral, and there was a warmth to it that Ji-hoon's penthouse, for all its expensive furnishings, completely lacked. Wow, Zara breathed as Marcus unpacked the bags on their small kitchen table. What's all this? Bulgogi, Ji-hoon explained, pointing to each container. That's marinated beef. And japchae, glass noodles with vegetables. Kimchi, which is fermented cabbage and might be too spicy for you. Tteokbokki, rice cakes and sauce. And these are mandu, dumplings. And hotteok for dessert. They're like sweet pancakes. You brought enough food to feed an army, Diana said, staring at the spread. This must have cost a fortune. It's from my favorite restaurant, Ji-hoon said. The owner is from my hometown in Korea. I wanted to share something meaningful. They ate at the small table, Zara wedged between her mother and Ji-hoon, fearlessly trying everything and providing running commentary on each dish. She loved the bulgogi, was suspicious of the kimchi until Ji-hoon showed her how to eat it with rice, and declared the hotteok the best thing she'd ever tasted. Diana was quieter, watching Ji-hoon with her daughter, clearly trying to reconcile this gentle man with the aura of danger and power that clung to him like expensive cologne. So what do you really do, Mr. Kong? Diana asked finally, after Zara had been excused to wash up for bed. And please don't tell me import-export. I've lived in New York long enough to know that's code for something else. Ji-hoon had been expecting this question, had prepared several deflections, but sitting in this warm apartment with this honest woman, the lies stuck in his throat. I manage business interests that aren't always entirely legal, he said carefully. I won't give you details because I don't want to implicate you in anything, but you deserve to know that I'm not a good man, Diana. I've done things that would horrify you. Have you hurt children? Diana asked bluntly. Never. I would die first. Have you hurt women? No. That's a line I don't cross. Diana leaned back in her chair, studying him. My husband was a firefighter. Do you know how many times he came home and told me about the fires that were deliberately set? About the drug dealers and gang members and criminals he had to save because that was his job? He used to say that most people aren't all good or all bad. They're just trying to survive in a complicated world, making choices with the information they have. Your husband sounds like he was a wise man, Ji-hoon said quietly. He was. And he also would have told you that what you've done in the past doesn't define what you can choose to do moving forward. Diana paused, then added, But if you're here because you're looking for redemption or absolution, I can't give you that. Only you can decide who you want to be. I'm here because your daughter offered me a hug when I was broken, Ji-hoon said honestly. And because you offered me kindness when you had no reason to. And because for the first time in 15 years, I walked into a place and felt like I could breathe. Something shifted in Diana's expression, a softening around her eyes. You're lonely. I'm surrounded by people every day. That's not the same thing. Diana stood and began clearing the table. You can come back if you want. For dinner, I mean. Not every night. I'm not running a charity kitchen, but maybe once or twice a week. Zara clearly adores you, and honestly, it would be nice to have adult conversation that doesn't revolve around SpongeBob or her latest school drama. I would like that very much, Ji-hoon said, standing to help her despite her protests. May I ask you something? Sure. Why are you trusting me? You don't know me. I could be dangerous. Diana turned to face him fully, her hands sudsy with dishwater. You are dangerous. I can see that. But you're also in pain, and pain I understand. Besides, Zara's instincts are better than any background check. If she thinks you're good people, that's enough for me. For now. Over the next 2 weeks, Ji-hoon found himself at Diana's apartment 3 times, then 4, then almost every other day. He brought food, gifts for Zara that were thoughtful rather than expensive, and most importantly, he brought himself, the real version that he'd hidden for so long. He taught Zara Korean words, laughed at her terrible pronunciation, helped her with homework even though American math baffled him. He sat with Diana late at night after Zara went to bed, talking about everything and nothing, building something that felt dangerously like friendship, or maybe something more. Diana's defenses crumbled slowly. She told him about the crushing loneliness of single motherhood, about the fear that she wasn't enough for Zara, about the guilt of sometimes resenting Marcus for dying and leaving her alone. Ji-hoon shared carefully edited stories of his own life, his mother's sacrifices, his father's disgrace, the choices that had led him down his current path. They didn't talk about his specific business, and Diana didn't ask, but the understanding hung between them that he was involved in something dark. It was Marcus, his bodyguard, who finally voiced what everyone in Ji-hoon's organization was thinking. Boss, you're being followed. The Volkovs have surveillance on you. They've noticed your visits to Queens. Ji-hoon felt his blood run cold. How long? At least a week. They have photos. Of you, the woman, the kid. That night, Ji-hoon met with Min-suk and his other lieutenants in the basement of one of his legitimate businesses. The surveillance photos were spread across the table like an accusation. Ji-hoon arriving at Diana's building. Ji-hoon and Zara at a park, feeding ducks. Diana laughing at something he'd said. Each photo was marked with dates and times, evidence of how thoroughly the Volkovs had been watching. Dmitri knows about them, Min-suk said flatly. He's going to use them against you. Then we move first, Ji-hoon said, his voice like ice. We hit his operations, his suppliers, his boss. Min-suk interrupted gently. That's not going to solve the real problem. The real problem is that you've shown weakness. You've given Dmitri something to target. You need to cut ties with the woman and her daughter. For their safety and yours. Ji-hoon stared at the photos, at Diana's smile, at Zara's joy, at the evidence of the only happiness he'd felt in years. No. Boss. I said no. Ji-hoon's voice was quiet but absolute. Find another way. Increase security on them without them knowing. Put surveillance on the Volkovs. I want to know every move Dmitri makes. But I'm not walking away from them. You're choosing them over the organization? Min-suk asked, clearly shocked. I'm choosing them over my own paranoia, Ji-hoon corrected. We've been at war with the Volkovs for months. This doesn't change our strategy. We just need to be more careful. But being careful wasn't enough, as Ji-hoon discovered 3 days later when he arrived at Diana's apartment for their usual dinner and found her waiting for him in the hallway, her face pale and her hands shaking. Someone was following me today, she said without preamble. A man in a black car. He followed me from the hospital to Zara's school and then home. Ji-hoon, what's going on? Ji-hoon felt rage and fear war inside him. Go inside. Pack bags for you and Zara. Enough for a few days. What? No. You need to tell me what's happening. I will, I promise, but right now I need you to trust me. Please, Diana. There are people who want to hurt me, and they might try to use you and Zara to do it. Diana's eyes widened with understanding and fear. This is because of whatever business you're really in, isn't it? Because of us spending time together? Yes, Ji-hoon said, not bothering to lie. I'm so sorry. I never meant to put you in danger. I'll have my people move you somewhere safe until I can resolve this situation. Move us. Diana's voice rose. Ji-hoon, I have a job. Zara has school. We have a life here. You can't just uproot us because you have enemies. I can and I will if it keeps you safe, Ji-hoon said firmly. Diana, please. These people don't play games. If they think hurting you will hurt me, they won't hesitate. Diana stared at him for a long moment, and Ji-hoon watched her process everything, watched her realize the full extent of what being close to him meant. Then she did something he didn't expect. She stepped forward and slapped him hard across the face. You selfish bastard, she said, her voice shaking. You came into our lives. You made Zara love you. You made me. She stopped, swallowing hard. You made us care about you, and all this time you knew this could happen? That we could become targets. Ji-hoon accepted the slap, the anger, deserving every bit of it. You're right. I was selfish. I should have stayed away. But Diana, I can't change what's already happened. All I can do now is protect you. Please, let me do that much. Before Diana could respond, Zara appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Mommy? Why are you yelling? Mr. Ji-hoon, why is your face red? Diana immediately shifted into mother mode, her fear hidden behind a bright smile. Everything's fine, baby. Mr. Ji-hoon and I were just having a grown-up discussion. Why don't you go back to bed? I can't sleep. I had a bad dream. Zara looked between them with the uncanny perception children sometimes have. Are you guys fighting? No, Ji-hoon said, kneeling down to her level. But Zara, I need to ask you something. How would you feel about going on an adventure for a few days? Like a vacation? Zara's eyes lit up. Really? Where? Somewhere safe and fun. With your mom. Would you like that? Can you come too? Zara asked, and the hope in her voice broke something in Ji-hoon's chest. I have to work, Ji-hoon said gently. But I'll visit as soon as I can. I promise. Diana made the decision then, reading something in Ji-hoon's face that convinced her this wasn't an overreaction. Go pack your favorite things, Zara. We're going to have a special trip. As Zara rushed off excitedly, Diana turned back to Ji-hoon. This better be temporary. And when this is over, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about boundaries and honesty. I understand, Ji-hoon said. Thank you for trusting me. I don't trust you, Diana corrected. I trust that you don't want us hurt. There's a difference. Ji-hoon had them move to a safe house in Connecticut that night, a comfortable property owned by one of his legitimate businesses, with round-the-clock security that Diana wasn't supposed to notice, but absolutely did. He returned to New York and threw himself into ending the Volkov threat once and for all, working with a focused intensity that bordered on obsession. But Dmitry Volkov was smarter than Ji-hoon had given him credit for. While Ji-hoon was consolidating his defenses, preparing for a direct assault, Dmitry was planning something else entirely. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, when Diana had convinced Ji-hoon's security team to let her make a quick trip back to the apartment to get some of Zara's schoolwork. The security accompanied her, of course, professional and thorough. But Dmitry's men were more professional, more thorough, and willing to use violence that Ji-hoon's people were trying to avoid in a residential neighborhood. The call came while Ji-hoon was in a meeting. Marcus burst in, his face ashen. Boss, they got them. Diana and the kid. The safe house security team is dead. Everything stopped. Time, breath, thought. Ji-hoon stood slowly, and everyone in the room took an unconscious step back from the cold rage that radiated from him like winter frost. Show me. The surveillance footage was brutal. 6 men, heavily armed, overwhelming his security team. Diana fighting like a lioness, trying to protect Zara. Zara screaming for her mother. Both of them forced into a van. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. Ji-hoon watched the footage 3 times, memorizing every face, every movement. Then he looked at his assembled lieutenants. Call everyone. Every soldier, every ally, everyone who owes us a favor. I want Dmitry Volkov found within the hour. Boss, if we go to war, Min-suk started. We're already at war, Ji-hoon interrupted. He just escalated it. Now we finish it. He pulled out his phone and found a message waiting, a video file from an unknown number. The video showed Diana and Zara tied to chairs in what looked like a warehouse, both unharmed but terrified. Dmitry Volkov appeared on camera, his smile cold. Kang Ji-hoon, I have something that belongs to you. Come alone to the address I'm sending, or I start with the child. You have 2 hours. Ji-hoon felt something break inside him. The last restraint he'd been holding on to. Find that warehouse. I don't care what it takes. Find it now. Boss, if you go alone, it's a trap, Marcus warned. Of course it's a trap, Ji-hoon said calmly. He pulled out Zara's drawing from his pocket, the one he still carried everywhere, now worn soft from handling. But they have my family. What else can I do? It took 45 minutes to locate the warehouse through a combination of satellite imagery, street camera analysis, and information extracted from Dimitri's lower-level associates, who suddenly became very cooperative when Ji-hoon's people explained the stakes. Ji-hoon prepared methodically, strapping on body armor under his suit, checking weapons he rarely carried himself anymore. I'm coming with you, Min-suk said. You can walk in alone, but I'll have a team in position. Ji-hoon nodded. For once, he wasn't thinking like a boss, like a strategist. He was thinking like a man who had something to lose, something precious and irreplaceable. He thought about Diana's laugh, about Zara's hugs, about the warmth of their small apartment, and the way they'd made him feel human again. The warehouse was exactly the kind of place where bad things happened, isolated and decrepit. Ji-hoon walked in with his hands visible, unarmed as instructed, knowing his team was positioning themselves outside. Dmitry waited in the center of the space, Diana and Zara still bound to chairs behind him. Diana's lip was bleeding, but her eyes blazed with fury rather than fear. Zara was crying silently, her small body trembling. Ah, the dragon arrives, Dmitry said mockingly. I wondered if you would come, if they were worth your life. Let them go, Ji-hoon said, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at his chest. Your problem is with me. They're innocent. No one who associates with you is innocent, Dmitry replied. You cost me territory, money, respect. Now you'll pay with what you value most. Wait, Diana said suddenly, her voice strong despite her fear. Let Zara go. Keep me. She's just a child. No, Zara cried out. Take me. Don't hurt my mom. Dmitry laughed. How touching. But I think. Take me instead, Ji-hoon interrupted, stepping forward. Let them both go, and I'll surrender. No fight, no resistance. You can do whatever you want with me. Just let them walk out of here safely. Dmitry considered, clearly tempted by the idea of having Kang Ji-hoon at his mercy. But greed made him stupid. I think I'll keep all 3 of you. Much better leverage. That was his mistake. Dmitry assumed Ji-hoon had come alone as instructed. He didn't know about Min-suk's team positioned around the warehouse. He didn't know about the sniper who had him in her sights. And he didn't know that when you threaten a man's family, that man becomes the most dangerous version of himself. The shot came through the window, clean and precise, dropping Dmitry before he could react. Chaos erupted as his men scrambled, but Ji-hoon was already moving. He reached Diana and Zara as Min-suk's team stormed in, shielding them with his body as gunfire exchanged around them. He felt something burn across his shoulder but ignored it, focused only on cutting their bonds with a knife one of his men tossed him. Are you hurt? Ji-hoon asked urgently, checking them both for injuries. We're okay, Diana gasped. Ji-hoon, your shoulder. It's nothing. He pulled them both close as the firefight concluded around them, his heart hammering against his ribs. Zara was sobbing into his chest, and Diana's hands were shaking as she held onto both of them. When the warehouse finally fell silent, with Dimitri's men either dead or surrendered, Ji-hoon carefully led them outside. Ambulances were already arriving, along with police that his organization had on payroll. Diana insisted on checking his shoulder wound herself despite her own trauma, her nurse instincts overriding everything else. You would have died for us, she said quietly as she bandaged him, Zara clinging to his other side. Without hesitation, Ji-hoon replied. Why? We've known each other for less than 2 months. Ji-hoon looked at Zara, who was staring up at him with complete trust despite everything she'd just been through, then back at Diana. Because somewhere along the way, you became my family. And family is worth dying for. Diana's eyes filled with tears. You're an idiot. A dangerous, complicated idiot. I know. But you're our idiot now, Zara said suddenly, her voice small but certain. You don't get to leave. Family doesn't leave. Ji-hoon felt something inside him break open completely, all the walls he'd built crumbling to dust. He pulled them both close, this brave woman and her wise daughter, and let himself feel what he'd been denying. Love, hope, home. The next year passed like a dream. Ji-hoon didn't leave his organization overnight. Power like his couldn't be abandoned without consequences, but he began the careful process of legitimizing his businesses, of stepping back from the violence, of building something different. He opened a small Korean restaurant as his first completely legal venture, hired people who needed second chances, and discovered that building something positive was infinitely more satisfying than destroying things had ever been. Diana was suspicious at first, watching carefully to make sure this transformation was real and not just a performance. But as months passed and Ji-hoon proved himself again and again, choosing them over business, choosing peace over power, her walls came down. They started dating officially, which Zara found hilarious since they'd basically been acting like a family for months already. The wedding was small, just close friends and Zara, who served as both flower girl and ring bearer because she insisted she could do both jobs. Ji-hoon's aunt flew in from Seoul, weeping with joy that her nephew had finally found happiness, that he'd finally chosen light over darkness. Diana wore a simple white dress and looked more beautiful than anything Ji-hoon had ever seen. On their first Valentine's Day as a married couple, exactly 2 years after that night in the hospital, they sat together in Ji-hoon's restaurant after closing. Zara was doing homework at a corner table, occasionally calling out questions in Korean that made her stepfather's eyes shine with pride. On the wall hung a photograph of the three of them, and beside it, a picture of Ji-hoon's mother and one of Diana's late husband Marcus. "Your mother would be proud of you," Diana said softly, following his gaze to his mother's picture. "I hope so," Ji-hoon replied. "I finally understand what she tried to teach me all those years. That power means nothing without love. That success means nothing without family. That we're not defined by our worst moments, but by our choices moving forward." "Heavy thoughts for Valentine's Day," Diana teased, but her eyes were gentle. "I'm allowed heavy thoughts. I'm Korean. We're very dramatic." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "But I'm also allowed to be happy. Your daughter taught me that." She saw a broken man crying in a hospital and offered him the most precious thing she had. Her mother. "I told you my mom's hugs fix everything," Zara called out from across the restaurant, not looking up from her homework. They laughed together. This family built from loss and pain and the small kindness of a child who didn't know that some broken things couldn't be fixed. Except she'd been right all along. Love could fix anything, even a man who thought he was beyond redemption. The lesson behind this story resonates deeply with the human experience. Family isn't defined by blood, but by who chooses to stay when darkness falls. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with the smallest acts of kindness, offered without expectation of return. A child's innocent wisdom can pierce through walls that years of experience have built, reminding us that we're never too broken to heal, never too lost to find our way home. Ji-hoon's journey teaches us that our past doesn't define our future, that redemption is always possible for those willing to make different choices, and that true strength lies not in power over others, but in vulnerability with those we love. Diana's courage shows us that opening our hearts again after loss is the bravest thing we can do, and Zara's simple faith reminds us that love really is the answer to most of life's complicated questions. Sometimes we all need permission to be human again, to feel deeply, to admit we're lonely, to accept kindness we don't think we deserve. And sometimes that permission comes from the most unexpected sources. A tired nurse working a double shift, a child with a worn teddy bear, a hand extended in the darkness. Thank you for taking this journey with us, for opening your heart to this story of loss, redemption, and the families we build from the ashes of our former lives. May you always have the courage to accept kindness when it's offered, the wisdom to see people's hearts beneath their armor, and the faith that tomorrow can be different than yesterday. Remember, you're never too broken to be loved, and it's never too late to choose a different path. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that second chances are real, that families come in all forms, and that sometimes the answer to "Are you okay?" is the beginning of everything changing. Until next time, take care of each other.